Hello everyone and welcome back to the Game Movie Jerks. Today we are returning to Hollow Knight because I guess that's what this channel is now. I'll be doing a tier list of every major area in the game based on how fun they are, the enemies there, and a third and less important category, their lore. Before we begin, I do want to warn you of huge spoilers up ahead as always. To start off with, in D tier I put Soul Sanctum and the Hive. I put these here mainly just because of the enemies here. In Soul Sanctum, I find the enemies a bit too difficult for how early in the game it is, and the fact that you probably haven't even gotten one nail upgrade by this point. The enemies here make the area pretty unfun, from teleporty guys to holy Jesus, those guys are fast. The lore here is pretty interesting, however I did say that this was a less important category, so all this really does is make the area better than the Hive. Speaking of the Hive, the enemies here are either a bit too powerful or maybe just really, expertly annoying. They can turn themselves into drills or something.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is!
But seriously, this makes little to no sense, so I'm not a huge fan. Not to mention that this place has little to no lore, which is obviously, definitely, certainly unacceptable. In C tier, I put Howling Cliffs at the bottom. This area has no enemies of its own, and the ones it does include are early game and pretty weak. However, finding all the important little secrets this area has to offer can be pretty fun. While the area itself houses very little lore, it does give us a glimpse at the outside of Hallownest, which is pretty cool. The Royal Waterways is down here in C tier as well, mostly because the enemies here are just really annoying. The lore here with Dung Defender is cool, but overall it isn't enough to lift it out. It just seems a bit annoying or maybe boring? I was told to put a poop joke here. Huh? Next would be the Resting Grounds, and this is because it really serves only one purpose, and that would just be to have somewhere to put the seer. Obviously, I can't really base this area off of the enemies here, because it only has one original enemy and a dream boss. Speaking of Zero, he is actually kind of a boring dream boss in my opinion. You can literally leave his range to heal without stopping the fight. Next up is Fog Canyon. This place is really small and has mostly extremely volatile enemies. Walking through this area with any kind of minion charm is usually a death sentence. The lore here with Monomon is quite interesting, however. But still, my main problem with this area is that everything explodes.
When in doubt, C4.
Best in C tier is the Kingdom's Edge. And honestly, I put this here just because it feels so empty. It, to me at least, just looks like an area where Team Cherry just dumped all the stuff they couldn't find anywhere else to put it. For example, the Coliseum of Fools wasn't originally supposed to be in this area, but was put here later in production. At the bottom of B tier, I put an area that I have pretty mixed feelings about, Deep Nest. Now, I really love the lore of Deep Nest, and the atmosphere has always been one of my favorites in the game, but there's a reason I always save this area for last. The enemies are dreadful, and Cornifer's map is basically useless when you get it. And I mean, really, you can't blame me for putting it here, can you? Next up, I put Dirtmouth, which is barely even an area, but whatever, it's here. It has some fun characters and things to purchase that keep you coming back. My only problem here is that I feel like Dirtmouth could have been expanded upon a bit more throughout the game, making it a bit more of a town with more people to see and talk to by the end of the game. Queen's Gardens is right after this, and while I do enjoy the environment, I just hate every enemy here. This place has my least favorite dream boss, and I highly dislike that roundabout you must take to get to the Stag Station. However, the Trader Lord is a fun boss, and the lore here with the Trader Mantises is very interesting. Most tier lists wouldn't put the White Palace up here at all, but it was extensive enough for me to do so, and besides, it is more of an area than Dirtmouth, and well, I put that here. Anyway, while I may not be able to judge this area off of enemies, I certainly can for its fun factor. I personally really like the White Palace, though I think it is a bit long. I do enjoy most of the platforming bits. The lore here is probably some of the most important lore in the entire game, so I'd also rank that pretty high. I think the only thing that limits it is both its large size and lack of enemies. And yes, I am aware that there are palace guards, but there is still only one enemy that will actually attack you. Right after the White Palace, I put the Infected Crossroads. This area is really cool, and I like some of the enemies here. However, I also hate a lot of the enemies here, and some random shortcuts are blocked off. The Violent Husk is kind of my least favorite enemy in the area, because he just runs and blows up, which is kind of annoying and also a bit boring. But otherwise, I do like the progression here after beating the Broken Vessel, and some of the enemies are fun as well. We have the Ancient Basin. I like the theme of being this far below the surface, but overall I think the stuff here just kind of limits it. This area just doesn't have much to offer and mostly just leads to other places. It leads to the White Palace, the Abyss, and has a tramway giving you access to the Hive and Deep Nest. The area with the broken vessel is pretty much it for this area, and I love the power-up it gives you, and I do like the broken vessel boss fight. There is a lot of lore here and I really like the environment, but I think it is still overall a little lacking. Last up in B tier is Green Path. While I also love the environment of this area, Green Path also has fun enemies and a lot of cool stuff. The Hunter resides here, where he is pretty interesting and mysterious, much like Nailmaster, one of them. I guess it's Shio. I obviously knew that all along. Anyway, my only real problem with this area is the lore here is just very simple and a bit boring. Un spawned the Mosskin and the plants themselves from a dream, and now the Mosskin await Un's return, which doesn't look like it's gonna happen, sorry bud. The first Hornet fight is also here, which is one of my favorite boss battles. This area's contrast to the previous area, Forgotten Crossroads, is interesting and immediately shows the player the diversity of the map. Starting off our A tier will be the Abyss. This area is very mysterious and houses super interesting lore. In fact, I would say this might be the most important and interesting lore in the entire game. To visit your birthplace and reunite with the ancient substance that gives you your power is a truly epic and amazing arc. The Void here is really interesting, but I would argue that it might be a bit too mysterious. It raises so many questions and doesn't answer any. There is simply too much speculation going on here. Although again, the lore that is here is simply fascinating in my opinion. Next up in A tier is the Crystal Peak, which my favorite thing about is for sure the environment in general. I think the whole mining crystal atmosphere is cool, creative, and ends up just looking really good in game. I also think it was an interesting choice to place the mines at the highest altitude on the map. The lore here, however, is a bit lacking. In fact, it is really lacking. But the enemies here and their designs make up for that. All the enemies here, except for this douchebag, are fun to fight and just cool to look at. Fungal Wastes are next in A tier. Again, with the environment, something I find creative and just really fun. Unlike the Crystal Peak, however, the enemies here are a little bit lacking. I don't think there's that many, and they're generally a bit annoying. However, this area also has the Mantis Tribe, who I find to be quite compelling. They have a cool backstory and are really the only example of people uninfected. Check out my lore video on their entire tribe, it's one of my favorites. This area also has one of my favorite charms, and an easy to access location is the Dashmaster charm. I like being as fast as possible, okay? My only real problem with this area is how fast you can get through it. All you have to do is go right until you can go down, then grab the Mantis Claw and go straight to City of Tears. Then you'll have to come back for a little bit to get into Deep Nest, but still, I could do it in like 15 to 20 minutes, and I am definitely not a speedrunner, that's for sure. Next up in A tier is the Coliseum of Fools, which again might be something that some people wouldn't include in their tier lists. However, enough time has spent here to count it as far as I am concerned. The Coliseum matches are super fun and raise a lot of interesting lore questions, some of which are a bit obvious and some of which have no good explanation as of now. Check out the lore video on that area as well. I honestly don't have much to say about this area, I just really like the Coliseum matches, as they are a serious test of skill, especially the last one, jeez. I have two more here in A tier, one of which is the Forgotten Crossroads. This area is the first you'll encounter in the game, which makes it the most important, really. I think this area does a really good job at showing the player what kind of stuff will lie ahead later in the game. It is a relatively simple map, basically just a loop, with a path down the middle and some areas branching off the main path. It also does a very good job at quickly showing the player the game's atmosphere. It immediately makes you feel alone and in danger, and how the areas down here can be a bit dreary. The enemies here are obviously easy, but are perfect for the new player getting used to combat in the game. This problem is also remedied later with the introduction of the infected crossroads. A lot of interesting things dwell here, kind of making you come back again and again. The lore here is generalized, and it just kind of fits into the general lore of Howling Cliffs itself, rather than sub-areas that have their own lore like Deep Nest or the Queen's Gardens. Maybe this area did have a truly interesting backstory, but it has been forgotten? Get it? Because it's the Forgotten Crossroads? Okay. The best area here in A tier is yet another area that most wouldn't count. Here I put the Path of Pain. There isn't much to say here other than that this is the ultimate test of platforming skill in my eyes. The ending of the area contributes a very, very important piece of lore to Howling's history. At the end of the area, we see why the Hollow Knight had failed in his mission to defeat the infection. We see that the Pale King and the Pure Vessel form some sort of bond or friendship, ridding the Pure Vessel of his hollowness and ruining the entire plan.
I had a goddamn plan!
I find this little piece of lore very important and interesting. As I said, I don't have much else to say here, other than that this area is immensely frustrating. It is still an amazing challenge with an epic payoff. Starting off our S tier will be Godhome. The idea to allow us to fight each boss from the game both in a boss rush mode and individually was super creative and awesome. The Pantheons are just super fun and also provide quite the challenge. Looking at you, Pantheon of Howlnest. In all seriousness, that Pantheon, if you haven't played it yet, takes almost an hour and also took me like at least 20 tries, if not more like 30. Not to mention that this area has super compelling lore, which you should totally check out my video on, the Godseekers. Adding a new ending to the game was a bold choice that I don't totally agree with, but it does raise super interesting lore-related questions that are hidden behind a pretty difficult challenge barrier. Next, we got City of Tears. This is the most recognizable area of the game. It is truly super diverse and has plenty of stuff to explore. The dreary and lonely feeling you get from being here really sets the mood for the rest of the game and most of its lore. The City of Tears also has the benefit of basically being two different areas, the left side and the right side. Even though they are kind of two different areas, it is clear that they are connected and certainly feel that way. The Husk Guards are diverse and fun to fight, while also being the most normal of the enemies. Overall, the area is important, recognizable, large, and just overall pretty fun. Lastly, the Mantis Village itself is my favorite area in the game. Obviously, I mentioned this area when I was talking about the Fungal Wastes, and again, you should check out the lore video on the tribe. But anyway, this area has the advantages of a creative and fun mushroom environment like Fungal Wastes, but has super interesting lore unlike the Fungal Wastes, which is a bit lacking in that department, in my opinion. The Mantis Tribe is a very important aspect of the game as they give you a glimpse of life both without infection and kind of before the infection in general. The enemies here are challenging but not annoying. The signs warning you of death and defeat upon entering the territory legitimately freaked me out the first time through, and really set the tone of this area very well. This area also has my favorite boss in the game, the Mantis Lords. I like this fight simply because it is fast-paced and more melee-focused than anything else, which is kind of the way I like to play the game anyway. I would dive deeper into the lore right about here, but since I've already done a pretty extensive video on that, I'll leave all that information over there in that video. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed. I was happy to get at least a short break from Hollow Knight in order to make the Pixar video and the soundtrack video. I also hope you guys enjoyed our Smash Bros. Compilations and do expect more Smash-related content in the coming months. Look forward to that, and as always, I'll see you guys next time on the Game Movie Jerks.